Let's start with the theme for this year's conference. It's the 54th edition of the conference. The theme for this year is rebuilding trust. How would you say that looking at all the given challenges, regional conflicts that are taking place here and there, especially looking at the one happening in the Middle East, what do you think will be the proper way to rechannel these things for proper trust to exist between nations? And what's your take on the argument that there has never been trust in the first place? And now that the conference is over, what do you think should be the starting point for participants to ensure that you start rebuilding trust among nations?
Yeah, that's a very good question. The starting point has to be that humanity has reached a certain turning point that is unprecedented in the history of humanity. And what are we talking about? We're talking about the capacity of totally wrecking the very life-supporting ecosystems of this incredible planet called Earth. As our friend with you there said, is our only home. And I think that's a very solid statement, because with the space exploration capacity that we've been able to develop over the decades, we're now able to assess the ability of hundreds and hundreds of millions of other planets in the various galaxies, not just our galaxy. And none of them have the capacity to support life the way this incredible, miraculous planet Earth does. However, we have developed our technology over the decades, in a way, even over the centuries, and deployed it in a totally irresponsible manner. The technology has evolved, but humanity, sadly and tragically, has not evolved enough to utilize the technology responsibly enough. And we're now seeing the effects of that. So much of that technology is deployed for warfare, which is nothing new. Human beings, mankind has always been fighting themselves over territory, over disagreements, over this, that, and the other. And in the old days, with the kind of warfare technology we had, we couldn't inflict too much damage, even though we did. But how many people can you destroy? How many children can you kill with bows and arrows? But then it evolved from just using bows and arrows. It evolved into deploying explosive devices. And it rapidly continued evolving and evolving into the kind of bombs and weapons of warfare, artificially intelligence-guided weapons that we're now deploying now, causing terrible, horrendous havoc. And worse, in that havoc is destroying children's lives, children. And as if that wasn't bad enough, irresponsible use of the technology and deploying it totally irresponsibly is now impacting very negatively, very, very negatively on the planet's eco-life support systems. Isn't it ironic that this Davos conference comes right on the heels of the official declaration that 2023 has now been acknowledged as the hottest year that humanity has ever recorded since we started recording temperatures about 150 years ago. But with scientific experiments and studying geologic forms and ice caps, deep ice samples, the indication is that the Earth has never reached this temperature since possibly 150,000 years. And what is more scary is that scientists told us that this is exactly what would happen. They mentioned this about 30 years ago, that if we continued using our technology in this horrendously irresponsible way, this is what would happen. And you see, this Earth is, it's it's got a function. It functions under certain temperature variances. And those same scientists that warned us 30 years ago that this would happen, they're also using their technology and responsibly this time to inform us that if we continue this way for very long, we're going to reach what they call tipping points, whereby we'll trigger off processes where the heating, the global warming, the heating will become spontaneous, and eventually, it would become unstoppable with catastrophic consequences. So, yes, trust. Well, how can you trust a system that is hell-bent on self-destruction? And those are my words. Those are the words of somebody far, far more knowledgeable than me. The words of the Secretary General of the United Nations, who said, mankind is waging war against nature, and this is suicidal, because nature always fights back. Remember, nature is bound by certain specific laws of action begetting reaction. So yeah, it's definitely, I think the trust deficit is at its lowest ebb now, and it's about time that we started having a renewal of our minds and a different attitude altogether. Otherwise, consequences will be terrible.
All right, like you rightly pointed out, that 2023 was recorded as the hottest year ever, where the Earth's temperature increased by 2 degrees Celsius. And at Davos, different talks have been ongoing as to long-term strategy to combat the effects of climate change and the environmental challenges. Now, one of them is the transition from fossil fuel to renewable energy. How soon can that happen? Do you see that happening all over the world? Or do you think it's going to be one part of the world being able to achieve that, and then the dependence on fossil fuel continues in other regions?
Yeah, that's a key question, because it is the burning of this fossil fuel that is mainly responsible for this temperature rise. This temperature rise that has brought us to the brink of an unstoppable destructive process. And again, I have to reiterate, it's not just speculation. Again, let's remind ourselves, 30 years ago, the scientists with pretty good technology, they informed us that we would overheat the world, we'd take it above its average temperature. And even like a human body, if your temperature goes above 1 degree, you're not very well. By the time it goes 1.5 degrees, let alone 2 degrees above average, like Earth's temperature did in November 2023, 2 degrees above average in the human metabolism, it's, you're ill. Okay, so scientists 30 years ago told us this is what would happen. And over those 30 years, they've been able to develop the technology far better. And they're extremely concerned. And because of this effectiveness of the technology, they've been able to see that, if this sustains much longer, this, which is being caused mainly by the burning of this fossil fuel, if it continues much longer, we're going to create a situation, as Secretary General of UN said, it is suicidal. He likened it to being in a vehicle heading towards a cliff, okay? A precipice in a vehicle. A precipice is ahead of you in that road. Maybe there was a bridge, the bridge has collapsed. You, the passengers, are aware that the bridge has collapsed. The driver of the vehicle is aware that the bridge has collapsed. And inside that vehicle, you have all your loved ones, your children, all your loved ones, you're in there. But Secretary General said that we're heading towards this precipice. And wait for it. Our foot is still on the accelerator. Okay, and that's a powerful analogy to what happened in 2015 And the Davos conference, right after that in 2016, also addressed this issue that, oh, wow, we're causing far too much pollution, burning all this fossil fuel is really, really causing terrible problems. And at the COP conference in Paris 2015, most of our world's leaders were there, and they all said categorically, we're going to reduce the burning of fossil fuel. We shall reduce the CO2 that is causing this problem. And in 2016 in Davos, it was more or less agreed by the world business leaders that, yeah, this is what would happen. We will reduce it. We will reduce it. However, the process of reduction now raised a major conflict because so much of the fossil fuel that is being burnt is generating tremendous amounts of money and profit. And here's where the conundrum is, to get to the answer of your question that can it be stopped? Will it be stopped? When will it be stopped? The conundrum is that our economic system is based now on profitability, which, you know, it makes a lot of sense. You want to run a business to be profitable. But what has happened is that the profitability factor of it now has taken precedence over everything. And we're now putting profit ahead of people, ahead of planet. And again, to quote the Secretary General of the United Nations, he said it's no longer tenable that our economic system, our capitalist system, and I personally feel that of all the isms, you know, capitalism is the one that has brought more benefits and more development to more people. But it has to be tempered with a humanistic attitude. And there has to be a paradigm shift to put people first. And then the planet, which is the people's life support system, second. And then the profit. Because if you're putting profit ahead of people's welfare, which is what is going on by the continuous deployment and use of this fossil fuel, which is, it gives off toxic gases. Look, if I brought a generator into your studio there and I turned it on, would you stay in the studio? You wouldn't, because you know what would happen. The burning of that gas, of that petrol, or even diesel, it will kill you. And by the way, several millions of people, some statisticians say that it's even up to 7 million people, maybe 6, maybe 8 million people around the world die every year as a result just of breathing in this toxic substance. Yeah, it's deadly. It's absolutely deadly. But if we're so caught up in it because it drives so much profit, then I'm sorry to say, with much apology, what's the difference between that and the armed robber who, for profit, will take a gun and do something terrible? I think the only difference is that we're able to appeal to intelligent people and to people with good hearts and maybe a little bit of myopic, and hopefully that appeal will get across. And this is what's going on in Davos right now. It's very, very encouraging. And I see a very, very fast transition away from burning the fossil fuel, which, by the way, it's far too valuable a resource to burn anyway, because it is a limited resource and it is giving us so many other benefits in other areas. All we need to do is use those other areas more responsibly. Plastic, for instance, and many, many other areas, lubricants. You know, it's a useful product, far too useful to burn. So yeah, will we transit? We will. I believe we will. How quickly it will be is the question. And we need to alert people maybe with wonderful organizations like this, that it must be done very, very quickly, no matter the cost. Because as one young lady from Uganda said, we cannot drink oil, we cannot eat coal, we cannot breathe so-called natural gas, and what good is money on a dead planet? God forbid that we shall kill our planet.
Interesting. Let me point your attention to the report released from WEF, even though we talked about it yesterday, but it's also important to bring it to you. According to the report, by the year 2050, climate change is going to cause additional deaths of about 14.5 million. And the world is also going to record economic losses of about $12 trillion. I would like you to shed more light on this. How will this play out, and what can be done to ensure that this imminent danger is being curtailed?
Yeah, it's actually, that's a very conservative estimate, because it gets to a point where you're now treading into really unknown territory in terms of the rapidity of the degeneration of the Earth's life support systems. And it could be a lot worse than that. It wouldn't be better than that. It could be a lot worse. So the transition has to be done very, very quickly. And in order for that to happen, we as human beings, as people, we must have a renewal of our minds. We must, because it's this old, I can call it the old sort of mindset of being driven by sense gratification, by being driven by issues of the flesh, wanting to enjoy more and wanting to enjoy too much more. And it's like a drug, it's addictive. So you have a nice car, but it's not nice enough because the system itself is persuading you that you need to purchase more. You need to expand the business process. So you need to get the nicest car, the latest model. And then, well, you don't have two, you only have one. Well, you need to get two cars. You need to expand. You need to, it's a process that is very, very, very difficult to get a handle on. But the reality is that we must get a handle on it. Otherwise, we're going to wreck the very system. I mean, those statistics that you reeled out now are very alarming. But as I said, that's a very conservative estimate. It could be a lot worse because we're triggering off processes that can cause catastrophic weather occurrences. When you're heating the ocean, and the ocean is the receptor of a lot of the heat, a lot of the global warming. The oceans of this world have never had this amount of heat in them, okay? And that heat, basic fundamental science, creates far more energy, far more evaporation. So you're getting far more water vapor in the air, which is the driver of these massive rain bombs. They don't call it rainstorms anymore. They call it rain bombs, and different cities around the world have experienced it. And those rain bombs totally overrun whatever drainage systems you have, let alone in places like we have in so many locations in Nigeria where the drainage systems are not even that effective anyway. You get massive amounts of rain. It's been recorded in the UK, in America, in different countries of the world, where you can get rain that would fall in a period of maybe 2 months, falling in one day. And this is just the beginning of the process. Again, more heat, more evaporation. And then more heat in the oceans, more energy. So you're getting massive ocean surges that are coming now, that are on the horizon, that are coming. So we need to get this into our consciousness that, okay, what has driven this? Because we were warned and we ignored the warning. Again, we go back to 2015 in Paris, where everybody even agreed. They agreed. They signed ratifications. Our president went to America in 2016 and we signed on the dotted line that we would reduce these global warming gases. And by 2022, 2023, the amount of gases, just CO2 alone, had never ever been so high. Coming from 280 parts per million before the Industrial Revolution 150 years ago, now hitting 400 parts per million. And that's after agreeing to reduce it. So what is now necessary is a renewal of our minds, a refreshing of our consciousness to appreciate that, okay, we can't continue this way. We have to change. We can't be driven so much by the sense gratification. We can't be driven so much by those things that will bring satisfaction to the flesh, satisfaction to the ego, to the pride. We have to be driven by those things that will bring care to each other, care and consideration. And for this, we can look into scripture. Like in Nigeria, the two main scriptures that we have, the Holy Bible and the Holy Quran, are very clear, you know. Love your neighbor as yourself. Assalamu alaikum, peace be unto you. And we need to activate this seriously and remove the hypocrisy. How can you say that you're loving your neighbor and you're destroying your neighbor's life support system? How can you say peace be unto you and you're causing a situation that will cause terrible chaos and catastrophe? So it's a turning point, and I'm very, very optimistic, especially for Nigeria, because we're a God-believing and to a great extent a God-fearing nation. And once this philosophy of creation care can be put across effectively from the various pulpits, I think we're going to see the necessary changes, the necessary renewal of our minds that will persuade us to now adopt the right attitudes towards this miracle of creation that we call planet Earth.
All right, the effect of climate change is already having its effect on natural resources such as food and water. And then the plan to put the world on a path that will bring about nature-based solutions. And there's some nature-based solutions that should be looked at that will help the world recover from some of these effects.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, definitely. First of all, we have to, as we said earlier, as we've referred to, you know, stop the pollution. We really, really got to fast track it. Difficult for Nigeria because so much of our economy is dependent almost entirely on those products. But again, you know, don't burn them, utilize them more responsibly for other ways. Okay, but the nature-based, it's all there. It's all there. And this is again the manifestation of the wonderful miracle of creation. I mean, when you see a green leaf, it's quite amazing. You know, in our LUFASI park, just after Aja, we have a lot of people come in, and by the time they just enter the park, because it's a little spot of original forest there, they start feeling refreshed. They say, "Oh, the air is so fresh, such a lovely atmosphere here." And they enjoy it. And in fact, the problem we have is a lot of them don't want to leave in the evening because they're breathing in the fresh air. And, you know, we share it with them that, well, you know, all these green leaves you see, what are they doing? They're giving you your most essential commodity, without which you can't survive for 10 minutes. Nobody can hold their breath for 10 or 15 minutes because you need the oxygen. And then you just meditate on the wonderful intricacy of the system, that these leaves can actually absorb our emitted carbon dioxide every time we breathe it out. And with the use of the sun's forces, they convert it into oxygen and emit it. And that is nature's way of providing the natural solution. Massive amounts of reforestation and protecting the forests that we have and holding them sacrosanct. Because not only are they giving us the oxygen, not only are they absorbing this excessive carbon dioxide that comes from burning the fossil fuel, they're also doing wonderful things in terms of helping the rain process to continue. They're almost like rain relay racers. They pass on the rain, they absorb the water that falls as rain through their roots, and then it goes through a transvaporation process, and then it's emitted as water vapor goes back into the atmosphere, is blown further down and falls again as rain. You know, they serve a wonderful, wonderful process. And that's just part of what they do. How about soil stabilization, how about food, how about medicine and so on. So yeah, reforestation and protecting our forests. And here again, we need to be alert because we're not. Nigeria has one of the fastest rates of deforestation in the world. As we're talking now, there's several locations around the country that have been massively deforested. In Cross River State, we've got very clear evidence of logging that's going on within a forest reserve area. As we're talking right now in Ibadan, there's a small forest that has been is being brought down. You know, so yeah, there has to be a change of attitude. But the natural system is the reforestation and protecting of the forest. We need to plant, you know, hundreds and hundreds of millions of trees. The Chinese are actually doing that. They have deployed their military. So the army, Chinese army, are planting trees. And we are working on at least trying to persuade our youth service corps to get involved in that in a very, very big way, because it has to be done. It has to be done. It's an essential part of our life support system. So yeah, that's the natural way. It's a good question. But again, we have to decide that we're going to do it, no matter what it costs.
All right, now let's look at the impact of urbanization on climate change. There are those who argue that urbanization is a necessity due to the fact that human nature will keep evolving, several activities will have to take place. But how do we strike a balance between the impact of urbanization and then, you know, protecting the ecosystem to ensure that you have a proper arrangement so that climate change wouldn't be an issue of difficulty?
Yeah, well, we just have to, you know, get it through our skulls that we're not here to change the climate. It's because of the climate that we have that we are able to be here. So I don't want to call it stupidity. I would just say it's, you know, ignorance, and a self-embraced ignorance in a lot of ways, rationalizing, getting caught up, misidentification of who we actually are. You know, we're here as custodians of creation. And it's again, scripture is very, very clear in scripture. In the Holy Quran, we're, you know, caliphs, we're stewards of nature. The scripture I'm a lot more familiar with is the Holy Bible, which, you know, right at the beginning of scripture, it says that we're put here to care for the place. And we're admonished that we should replenish. So it's grossly hypocritical that you can go to a place of worship and you can worship the Creator and profess, you know, God, I love you. And the God you're professing to love has told you that you are a steward of his creation, which is your life support system. He's told you to love your neighbor as yourself. And who's your closest neighbor? It's your child. And you're saying, God, I love you. I'm loving my neighbor. And and you're destroying their life support system by triggering off this climate change. You see, there's still a bit of ignorance there because people are refusing to accept the reality of what the scientists are telling them.